The title of this talk tonight is called Wizards and Warlords. Fantasy has what I consider a bad rap for quite some time. Some of these rejections, they came to me saying, fantasy is of the devil, it's the dark side, we don't want our kids exposed to this. And I try to assure parents especially, I know it's dark in a lot of places. I know that you have series out there like His Dark Materials where God is the bad guy and he needs to be killed, and you have lots of sex and violence, and there's a lot of bad stuff out there. But when I was trying to figure out if I should be writing fantasy, you see, my fantasy story began when I had a dream about a boy who could breathe fire. I was trying to write family-friendly adventure stories that didn't have anything close to being fantasy. But when I had this dream about a boy who could breathe fire, I told my oldest son about it, James. Not this James. My son James is 31 now. My James was 13 at the time. He said, Dad, that's a really cool dream. You should write a dream about this boy who could breathe fire, because then it would be a fantasy story. And I love fantasy stories. If you want to reach kids my age, you should write a fantasy story. So, how do I write a fantasy story? We just brainstormed on how this boy could breathe fire, that his parents used to be fire-breathing dragons, and they were transformed into humans, but kept their dragon genetics. And I can tell you much more about the story, but that was the basics. But I wasn't sure if I should write this fantasy story. As a Christian, I believe looking into what would Jesus do. I was already convinced that storytelling was a great way to teach because Jesus told stories. He told parables. I believe it's because we remember stories better than we remember academic teaching. A good pastor knows that when he preaches. He'll preach the 3 points from the scripture, and usually he'll tell a story to drive the point home. When you get home, what do you remember? It's the story. And if you remember the story, you should remember the lesson behind the story. Everyone who teaches knows that telling the story drives it home. So I was looking at some of the stories Jesus told. Then I saw this one that said, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I was thinking, I've never seen a camel pass through the eye of a needle. In fact, Jesus said in the story at the end, he said, with men this is impossible. With God all things are possible. All a fantasy story is a story that can't possibly happen without some kind of supernatural help. A miracle is supernatural help. Jesus told a fantasy story. The difference is he could have done it, he could have made a camel pass through the eye of the needle. But if you look at all of Jesus' miracles, whether it's walking on water, making a fig tree wither by speaking to it, making a coin appear in the mouth of a fish, if you took all of Jesus' miracles, put them in a storybook, changed the name of the person who did it, and set it in another world, what would the genre be? It would be a fantasy story. The difference is that Jesus really could do these things, but his teaching method used the fantastic. The reason is, it's because, yes, we remember stories, but the more fantastic a story is, the longer we'll remember. So I was convinced that I wanted to write a fantasy story. If Jesus could do it, I could do it too. I just had to figure out how to sell it once I got this fantasy story done. But I can prove to you that fantasy will help you remember. I do this to kids all the time in schools. Sometimes I go to schools and kids don't care anything about reading, so they're sitting there bored. And I tell them, I can prove to you that fantasy helps you remember. You're standing here talking, you're hearing this all the time, you're thinking either it's boring or it's okay, but you'll forget it in a couple of days. But if I add a fantasy element to my talk, like drawing a sword, it's a real sword. Suddenly they all wake up, especially the guys are going, you didn't tell me he's going to bring a sword, that's so cool. And just because I've added a fantasy element, there's lots of swords in fantasy stories quite often. You'll remember it longer. And certainly the kids in the schools do. In fact, Sometimes I'll go to a school, 3 years, 3 years gap between going to this school, go the second time, and the kids that I talk to in the 5th grade might still be there in the 8th grade. You still got that sword? They remember it. Anyway, so I wrote Grace and Dragons in about a year, and started sending that off to publishers. More rejections. But finally, 8 years later, this one editor at a Christian publishing house had never done fiction before, much less fantasy, decided to take a chance on it. And 500,000 copies of this story world later, they're glad they did. But anyway, that's a long intro to this. I was a computer geek by profession for 20 years. So analyzing things is what I do. I am an incurable analyst. Even when we're watching movies together, I drive my family crazy by saying, I start talking about how the story could have been different, the story holes here, oh, that's such contrived dialogue, I can't believe it. Just enjoy it. I can't. It's terrible. So I looked at the fantasy genre, trying to identify what I would consider to be the elements of Christian worldview fantasy versus fantasy that might be dark and harmful. And also, why do kids like fantasy so much, and how does it affect them? What does it do to them? So I came up with this presentation. So, one thing it does is it inspires character building. One thing that fantasy allows is the great hero who seems to be larger than life. Someone that you probably never met, like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, and Aslan and the Chronicles of Narnia. Just really awesome people. Because in other genres, most of the editors would say, oh, nobody's that cool. Nobody, that's not realistic. Fantasy allows for that because people go, well, it's fantasy. You could have this really larger-than-life hero. It's just fine. And I believe that inspires character building because readers naturally want to aspire to be like that heroic figure. Now, I believe that we can be that good. I believe we can be that heroic, that courageous, that spiritual, because God gives us the ability to do so. So the fantasy genre was a natural for me as one who believes that we can rise above mediocrity, that we can walk in the light, that we can be obedient to God and be that larger-than-life hero. So that's one reason why a lot of readers have been attracted to my stories. Not just because I write fantasy, because I help them to believe in being something greater than they are now, and that they really can aspire to it and achieve it. And they read my characters and they do feel real anyway. Even though they are larger than life, I give them a realism which allows the reader to embrace them and say, that person's just like me, but look what he did, look what she did. And my readers try to emulate that. So it inspires character building. It enhances the desire to read. I have heard from lots of moms who say that their children are reluctant readers. Why, Johnny wouldn't even read the back of a cereal box, but he picked up your book and he wouldn't put it down until he was finished. I've heard that many times. And then once they've read that book, they go, well, that wasn't so bad. Reading's pretty cool. Then their minds are exercised to take in the written word more readily, even if it's not fantasy. They become accustomed to reading. So it's a good starting book for a lot of young readers who are reluctant. It builds the imagination. I guess that's no brainer, right? Fantasy is going to build the imagination. But we have to make sure that it builds it in the right way. Because it can build dark fantasy can build the imagination from some very dark worlds. But one thing that opened my eyes to the power of fantasy was the Bible story about the Elisha, and the king was trying to come and capture him. And Elisha's servant was scared. He said, look, the master, they're coming to get us. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, let him see that there are more of us than there are of them. And the servant's eyes were open, and he would see that they were surrounded by chariots of fire. This is similar to what fantasy does. Because the Bible also says we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities and powers that we can't see. Fantasy helps us to believe in things that we can't see. It trains the mind to believe in the invisible. That there's more to this world than the material and the physical and the things that we can see. And the more that fantasy readers read good Christian fantasy, the more that they are accustomed to thinking, well, maybe there really are angels. Maybe there really are demons. And a heaven that I'm hoping for that no one's ever been able to come back and tell us about, except Jesus, of course. Okay? It encourages friendships. Well, that one was a surprise to me. When my books first came out, I built this message form for readers of my books to get an account, log on, and talk about my books. I expected to get a dozen kids to be involved and chat about my books. Well, we got up to 500 members exchanging 1 million messages, and it was just overwhelming. These people became close friends. The thing about the fantasy genre is readers get attached to these books, and they want to talk with others about them. And they find that if someone else likes to read fantasy, and not only they like to read fantasy, but they like to read this particular book, automatically they know this person is a kindred spirit. This person thinks the same way I do. And they're fast friends. And a lot of these people often feel alone in their own worlds because not that many, my friends don't like to read, they just want to be on their iPods all the time, they just want to be doing this with their telephones or whatever. I want to explore worlds, and they can't find many friends like that, but they find them online. So many people have become very close friends through online, through the relationships with others who read these books. I didn't tell you that all of these drawings are from my readers who send me drawings. This was a 10-year-old who drew this. Wow. Pretty impressive. So motivates to action. Those of you who read my books, are you familiar with this character? It's a favorite character for a lot of people. It's from the book Circles of Seven, Shiloh. One of Shiloh's favorite characters. All right, that motivates through action, through example, empowerment, empathy, and encouragement. I worked hard to get all E's there, alliterate. But I'm going to go over each of these and how they work. One thing about reading, I believe reading should do something to you that allows you to step up and act on it. What's the purpose of reading a book if it's just for entertainment? I want my readers to finish the book and say, now what can I do about what I've just read? And the reason they're able to do it is because they see the characters in situations that are emotionally similar. Certainly not physically similar, because we aren't riding on dragons and we aren't doing all these fantasy trappings, but we have emotional similarities to what's going on and their difficulties. And they see the characters step up and do something about it. Motivates through example. This is a clip from Lord of the Rings. Has anybody here not seen Lord of the Rings? Not seen it? You haven't seen it? So do I have to explain everything, but you'll be all right? Okay. This is Elrond, the Elf King. Some people say I look like him. People say it a lot. Are you Elrond? You know, pointy ears. Elrond has gathered a council of elves and dwarves and humans to try to decide what to do with this ring. They know they want to destroy it. He's going to tell them the only way to destroy it is to throw it in a volcano called Mount Doom. And Boromir is going to step up and tell how impossible that is. Now our little hero character, Frodo, is going to be hearing all this. We're going to see him listening to this, and he's scared, he's frightened. He's looking at the ring like it's talking to him. So the impossibility of this mission is laid out very clearly. We see what Frodo does about it. Let's see if this is turned on. I hope it works.
He destroyed any craft that we here possess. The ring was made in the fires of Mount Doom. Only there can it be unmade. It must be taken deep into Mordor and cast back into the fiery chasm from whence it came. One of you must do this. One does not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep. The great eye is ever watchful. It is a barren wasteland, riddled with fire, ash, and dust. The very air you breathe is a poisonous fume. Not with 10,000 men could you do this. It is folly.
Have you heard nothing Lord Elrond has said? The ring must be destroyed.
I suppose you think you're the one to do it!
And if we fail, what then? What happens when Sauron takes back what is his?
I will be dead before I see the ring in the hands of an elf!
Let me go.
No one trusts an elf!
I will take the ring to Mordor. I do not know the way.
So even though he's heard that it's absolutely impossible to do, he steps up and says, I'll do it. It's impossible. When readers see this, and then they see that they actually go out and do it anyway, because of their courage and their faith, they can relate to that. Well, my problems are impossible. I got this bully at school. Maybe I'm abused by one of my parents or whatever it is. I'm trapped. I don't know what to do. They can feel the emotional connection. And then I love the end of it, not just when he said, I'll do it, but he says, but I don't know the way. I don't know how. But also an admission that he needs help. It's not like I'm all so big, brave, and strong, I'm going to do this thing. It's, I'll do it, but I don't know what to do. That's where the empowerment comes in. Frodo gets the help that he needs. And that's all part of the story. The unlikely hero, because there's no way he can do it, steps up. All he has to do is be willing. That's what it's like in our spiritual lives. All we have to do is be willing. Say, God, I don't know how to do it, but here I am, send me. Hey, I've sent you, I'm going to send you the help along as well. We see that again and again in Christian-based fantasy. So he was willing to do it. I'll give you an example. I heard from a girl in, how old was Jessie, 17? In Grand Rapids? She's 17. She was 16 or 17. She was being sexually abused by her father. And threatened. You know, if you ever tell your mother, you know, I'll kill you or whatever they do. And then she saw signs that he was about to start on her younger sister. And one night she was just weeping, all alone, had just been abused. And she looked up at her bookshelf and saw my books up there. She said to herself, what would Bonnie do? What would Bonnie do in this situation? She was abused by her father, not in the same way, but still abused, felt trapped. And because of fictional characters in a book, she said she'd do something about it. And she told the police. And that man is now out of their house forever, and her sister will never be bothered by it. She had the courage to do it because be motivated by an example in a fantasy story. That's how powerful it can be. So it instills courage. You saw Frodo, he was willing to do it, but was he scared? Yeah, he was scared. That's what courage is. Courage is the willingness to step up and do what's right, even if you're scared. Because if you're not scared, it's not courage. If you're never more scared, you don't even know that's courage. Courage requires fear to be courage. To say, I'll step up and I'll do it anyway. That's what courage is all about. Also, in most Christian-based fantasy, you're going to find that the character learns from a spiritual guide early in the story. And here, Frodo is talking to the spiritual guide Gandalf. And they're in the mines of Moria, and Frodo is lamenting that he ever had the ring. And he gets a lesson from his spiritual guide. Make sure this turned out. Wait, this one's kind of quiet.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil. Bilbo was meant to find the ring, in which case you also were meant to have it. And that is an encouraging thought.
So in most of these fantasy stories, you're going to find that spiritual guidance firmly implanted. He says, you've seen a lot of evil, Frodo. Yes, I know you've seen a lot of evil, but there must be good out there. There are other forces. Someone meant it for you to find this ring. Something out there is guiding your steps. But also the spiritual guide often allows them to see how empowered he really is. And not the guide, but the hero. Frodo is powerless to be able to do this, but the powers that be in the story provided what he needs. He has to face this Balrog, this huge creature. There's no way Frodo could have defeated this creature. But the God of the story, although Tolkien never mentions God, you know that there is a God-like being out there watching over everybody, brings the spiritual guide to help him get past this Balrog.
Certain to the secret fire, you miracle flame in Monarno. Dark fire shall assail you, flame of Udon! Go back to the shadow.
Notice two things. One, he said, I'm the servant of the secret fire. That's letting both Frodo and the storyteller, the story reader, know that the power is coming from on high. Tolkien didn't call it God or something like that. The secret fire was that source of power. And it helps the reader to know the unlikely hero steps forward and says, I'll do it, and that power from on high will come to help if it's the will of the one who has called him to do it. Second thing, Gandalf gets pulled into this chasm. He goes away for a long time in the story. The reason is, and you'll find this in a lot of stories, where the spiritual guide gives guidance and then goes away, so that the hero can prove that he or she has learned and is able to apply that guidance, because if the guide stays there all the time, it becomes a crutch. Don't want that. Let the hero stand up on his own 2 feet by using what he learned from the guide. And here we see that Frodo's going to do that. Because of these people who have gone with him on this journey, some of them are getting killed and hurt. And Frodo's trying to decide, what do I do about that? How do I get this ring to Mordor without my friends getting killed? Now he's contemplating that, and we're going to see that the spiritual guide's lesson comes back into play.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So for all who live to see such times, that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
So once again, you can tell he was scared, but he stepped up and did it anyway. This is what I was taught. There is someone watching over me. I can do this by myself. That's what he decided. But I've had all this help, but I know that this, whatever this God in this world is called, is going to watch over me. I'm going to go. And one reason why this works so well in fantasy versus other genres, because editors of other genres would say that is, if it's not fantasy, if it's contemporary or historical fiction, that is just so hokey. You have someone come up telling you what to do, and then he goes away, and then you just do it anyway. They say they think that's hokey. It never works that way. Nothing's ever clean cut like that. But in fantasy, people go, well, yeah, it's fantasy, it's fine, I can do this. But actually, this is exactly how life works. It really is. Your parents teach you what you need to know, and then you go out and they're gone for a while. That's exactly how life works. The Bible worked that way too. You had the prophets, and they talked to us about what we needed to know. And then there was silence for what, 400 years? That's just the way life is. We read the scriptures, and we study it, and we memorize it. And then we go out in life, and maybe the Bible's not with us at that moment, but it's in here. And when we receive the spiritual challenges that come to bear, it's exactly how life works. And that's why I like fantasy so much, because it shows us how life works. And all we have to do is, when we're presented with a challenge, to say, Lord, here I am, send me. And we get the help we need. It is universal. And so he was willing to go and do exactly what he believed in based on what he was told. Okay. I found that fantasy also inspires love and friendship. One thing cool about fantasy is it shows the intimate bonds of friendship that are perfectly loyal. In a lot of other genres, they allow the so-called friends and siblings to spat and argue all the time. But Frodo and Sam, yeah, they had one argument when Frodo was so hypnotized by the ring, but in real life, before the ring came, they were very close friends. And one thing that it does better than most genres is it allows male-to-male friendship. You see female-to-female friendship in a lot of other genres. Male-to-male, not so much, but it is in fantasy all the time. And I think that's one thing males in our culture are missing. Close male bonding. I think the girls get this. They have really good, close girlfriends. But guys, we don't do it so much. And I'm not sure why. I know why I don't, because I live in a home with my wife and daughters, and we even have a female dog. There's nobody around. There's only 680 people in my town, and most of them are farmers. They want to talk about farming. I don't know anything about farming. So most of my male friends are on the internet, but it kind of makes it difficult to have a close relationship. But you're going to see friends in fantasy stories being willing to die for each other. And that's the way we should be too. My wife is my best friend, and we're willing to die for each other. And I believe real life and real friendships can and should be like that. Here we see Frodo and Sam near the end, where they are on the slope of Mount Doom. They're almost there. They've gone on this horrible journey, and now Frodo's completely broken and battered. He cannot move. He's the only one who's allowed to take the ring because he's the ring bearer, and his friend Sam is there. There's only one way that he can think of to encourage him, and that's to remind him of the mission, remind him of the Shire, and that's why they're here, to save the Shire from Sauron. He tries to remind him of it, and even that doesn't work. So he comes up with the only way he has left to help him.
It'll be spring soon. The orchards will be in blossom. And the birds will be nesting in the hazel thicket. And they'll be sowing the summer barley in the low fields. And eating the first of the strawberries with cream. Do you remember the taste of strawberries?
Oh, Sam. I can't recall the taste of food. No, the sound of water. The touch of grass. Naked in the dark. There's nothing, no veil between me and the way of fire. I can see him with my waking eyes. Then let us be rid of it. Once and for all. Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you. But I can carry you. Come on!
Beautiful picture of intimate friendship that's rare in other genres. Like I said, my wife is my best friend, but I don't think she could carry me up Mount Doom. She'd find a way. Get an old mule and drag me up there, right? A gentle mule. Okay, on we go. Knights in shining armor. It's interesting to see that the drawings that boys send me differ greatly from the drawings that girls send me. You see this guy? He's got a sword and a boomerang and a gun and bow and arrow and a shield. He's ready to fight. I think boys are naturally wired that way. They want to fight. Now I know it's stereotyped, but in general, boys are more wanting to fight than girls are. In fact, I've learned this with 4 girls and 3 boys myself. If you give a 2-year-old boy a banana, what does it become? It's a gun, right? You give a 2-year-old girl a banana, she eats it. Or it becomes a thumb. They're just different. So I think this wiring is important to understand. Because the boys literally want to draw swords. Because when I draw that sword and show it, some of the girls think, hey, that's cool, but the guys are going, I'm gonna have that sword. They are wired to fight. And the thing about fantasy, good Christian fantasy, is that it has violence. My stories have lots of violence. Those of you who read them can attest to that. There's a lot of violence going on. But the violence always has a purpose. It's always, we're fighting for something good, to make step ahead in the story and accomplish something. Not because we just want to fight, not because we're charged with hatred and revenge, but because we want to rescue the slave from the oppressor. We want to rescue the fair maiden from this horrible man who's oppressing her. Always something positive, and that's why we fight. So the genre tells young men, your wiring is not messed up. There's so many in our culture say, "Oh, never fight, little Johnny, never fight." But his body and his whole being is saying, "I need to." They need to know that they can try to stop that bully from hurting someone else. They need to know that they can knock down the man who is hurting the little girl. You can do that. You're allowed to do that. In fact, I want you to do that. Because it allows good versus evil violence. And a good Christian writer knows you need to make it clear why this violence is taking place. To step forward and do something good. So the readers are then trained to think in those ways. Fight, but fight for what? Fight for what purpose? For something good. Also, always like to breathe fire. I'm not talking about a literal sense right now, but I find that boys like to talk big. That even starts early. My daddy can beat up your daddy. And maybe it's trash talk in sports, or who can have the biggest or the best or cleverest cut down insult remark. Ooh, you got him that time. They like to see that their words have power and are able to do something. But the trouble is, it's often corrupted into doing something negative, cutting down and hurting with your words. What fantasy does, better than any other genre, is allows for the great oratory. Allows for a character to speak in a way that is so wise and so empowering and so uplifting. Nobody in real life can talk like that just off the cuff. Boom, there's your talk, there's your speech. But in fantasy, people say, well, it's fantasy, maybe people can do that. But I have found that the more a person is accustomed to building up with their speech, the more capable they are of doing it. I practice this with my own wife and my daughters and my sons too, constantly uplifting, encouraging, edifying. You will never hear me speak a negative, critical word to my wife or my kids. Now I might suggest, well, maybe you shouldn't have done it this way, here's another way to do it. But you will never hear me say something like, oh, you're just such a loser. Oh, you're no good at that, you're terrible. Never happens. In fact, something like that happened recently where I heard somebody say something negative to one of the kids. And I talked to my daughter about it. And she said, if you ever said that to me, I'd say, who are you and what'd you do with my father? My point is, the more you train yourself to speak with edifying words, and the more you train yourself to compliment, the better you are getting it. The better you will be at doing it. And you can do it in such a way that you become eloquent. You will actually become eloquent and be like these fantasy characters who can just say these uplifting things off the cuff. You will find that sports coaches become very, very good at this. Some coaches will do it in a derogatory way, but some, that halftime speech or the speech right before the game, come on, you can do this. They get really good at it. And so can you if you practice it. Here we see Aragorn going to do that. The reason Frodo and Sam were able to get up to Mount Doom is because Aragorn has challenged all the bad guy orcs to come out of Mordor to fight. That was his purpose for fighting. So they all clear out of Mordor to allow Frodo and Sam to get up Mount Doom. The trouble is our human army here is scared because the army marching out of Mordor is huge. There's no way they can beat them. So, since they're shaking in their boots, Aragorn has to encourage them with oratory.
I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me. A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day. An hour of war
this helps young men know. You know that feeling you have in you, that you want your words to be powerful? That is good wiring. You need to do it. Make your words powerful, but make them for building people up and not tearing them down. And I guarantee you that those people who learn that, they'll be more satisfied with the power of their words that way than they are with the insults. Lift yourself up, lift others up. Don't bring others down to your level. That's evil, and it'll make them feel bad in the long run. Okay, girls give me different kinds of drawings. The beautiful fair maiden, I see that a lot. And one of my characters has wings, and she looks like that. I find a difference in the girls in that boys all seem to be alike. They want to fight. They want to talk big. I know there's still a spectrum. Not all guys are alike, but still there's a bigger cluster in the middle of guys who like to do this. Girls have a wider spectrum. We see the kind that are just longing to be loved. They want acceptance. They want someone who will take them in and be a partner with them. You know, they might say, I can't draw a sword. If I picked up a sword, I'd cut my own head off. I can't fight. But if you just give me a warrior that I can be with and I can bite his wounds and encourage him and say, I believe in you, go out there and do it. And I want to be behind the scenes and be a helper. Just give me someone to attach to it and I'll be the best at it. That's one end of the spectrum. By the way, the girl who drew that one on the right was 17 when she drew that. It's quite amazing. Then I see the other spectrum, one who wants to help by fighting. I want to be the one who's out there fighting. Yeah, give me a sword. I'll do it. And so in good fantasy, we're going to show that spectrum. We're going to show the girls on one side, that one section of girls can attach to and say, I want to be like her. And the one who wants to go out there and fight. And the other side of the spectrum, the girls say, I want to be like her. And those who've read my books, you know who that is? That's Sapphira, okay? And she can make fire with her hands, okay? One time she went into battle on one of my books and someone said, doesn't Sapphira get a weapon? And the other person said, Sapphira is a weapon. So you don't have to worry about her. So in Lord of the Rings, we have the feminine female, the Aragorn's girlfriend, what was her name? Arwen, is that right? Now in the movie they made her a little more fighting spirit, but that wasn't true in the book. But also they had the fighter, Eowyn. And we see her here in her warrior role. She is meeting up with this Nazgul, who has a prophecy that says that no man can ever kill him. And the warrior girls are going, yeah, that's me. So I see the spectrum quite often. So I want to do that in my own stories. I have the feminine role that wants to be the helper and also the warrior who wants to be part of the fight. So what are the characteristics of positive fantasy? How can you tell them apart? Like I said, there's a lot of dark fantasy out there. So here's some of the major categories I identified. One, you have a clearly defined good and evil. You know who's good and you know who's not. A lot of fantasies out there try to blend the lines. They make the hero character do a lot of bad things, the anti-hero. Or maybe the villain, oh, he's not so bad. He's got these nice things that he's doing. No, we know. We want to know who's good and who's evil. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, was Lucy and Peter, were they good or evil? Good. How about the White Witch? Evil. It was easy to tell. Was Sauron good or evil? He's evil. Frodo was good. No question. Star Wars, Darth Vader, evil. Luke Skywalker, good. He didn't have any problems. We want to be able to define it clearly. The hero or heroine is basically virtuous. The person that the reader is supposed to cheer for. You're not going to find this person lying, cheating, stealing, being promiscuous. An example of a fantasy that does that improperly would be the Indiana Jones series. He was always immoral in every episode. That's not good fantasy. Another one would be the Harry Potter series. The heroes and heroines are constantly lying and cheating and stealing, even for selfish benefit. That would not be considered Christian worldview fantasy. Also, the violence is not gratuitous. Gratuitous means for free. They're not doing it for no reason. There's always a reason to fight. In other words, when they're fighting, they have a purpose. It isn't just, let's go out there and spill blood. Adults are not all evil or foolish. I picked up on this one when I was reading a series of unfortunate events. You ever read that? Every adult in that story is either the bad guy or the most stupid person you'll ever meet. They're all really foolish. So the young people were the only ones who were good and wise. That's not a good lesson, because now I know some adults are evil, some are foolish, but some are wise and they're supposed to be counselors. And if we show a realistic mix like that in our stories, it helps the reader to know, as these characters use their discernment to figure out whom to trust among the adults, they can use some of those same principles. Whom do I trust among the adults who really are wise? We don't want them all to be either evil or foolish. Bad behavior has consequences. Yes, we have a basically virtuous hero, but suppose he does make a mistake. We don't want the story to reward that behavior. I have a character, Billy, who was reading this prophetic book, and the book was showing up lettering on there that they were able to read as it appeared. And one of the prophecies early in the book said, don't ever turn the page until the page is full. And it got near the end of the page, but not quite. And he was thinking, okay, is that it? Should I turn the page? He knew he shouldn't have. But it was just driving him so crazy. Maybe that is really the end. So he was in his mind, trying to rationalize turning the page. So he did, and then a dire prophecy came up that basically said, I shouldn't have done that. And everything fell apart. He ended up getting kidnapped, thrown in the trunk of a car, and his bad behavior did not get rewarded. So bad behavior should have consequences. God figures are likable and good. Like Aslan. Likable and good. He was the God figure, or at least represented the emperor across the sea, as it says. There are some stories where the God figures are terrible. I mentioned His Dark Materials, where God was a doddering old fool who oppressed the people, and the two teenagers had to kill him to release everyone from oppression. That's what that story was about. So we want the God figures to be trustworthy. All right, I have one more clip to show you where we put a lot of these things together. Watching this story can you tell evil from good very clearly? The main character, is this main character sacrificial and heroic? Is this character fight? Is this character reluctant to fight until he is sure that the fighting has a purpose? Watch all of these in this Star Wars.
Cannot hide forever, Luke.
I will not fight.
Give yourself to the dark side. It is the only way you can save your friends. Yes, your thoughts betray you. Your feelings for them are strong, especially for sister. So, you have a twin sister. Your feelings feelings have now betrayed her too. Obi-Wan was wise to hide her from me. Now his failure is complete. If you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will.
Hate has made you powerful. Now, fulfill your destiny. Take your father's place at my side.
I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
So be it, Jedi.
Okay. Now, he said it was his hate that made him powerful, but you know why he really fought. It was his love for his sister. He didn't want to fight. I'm not going to fight my own dad just because he's evil. But when he said, I'm going to now go after your sister, that changed everything. And he was willing to fight for her. So it was his love that drove him to fight. But then when he had won, he was called now to destroy your father. No, fighting's over. I'm not going to join you. Could you tell who was good and who was evil? That was pretty easy, wasn't it? And a virtuous hero? Absolutely. It's all there. This is, I know that Star Wars, the creator of Star Wars was a Zen Buddhist, I realize that, but it still has a lot of the characteristics of positive fantasy that we want. Light versus darkness, good versus evil, virtuous hero. It's all there. You know, if you can just put away some of the Buddhist aspects, you can get a lot out of it. Let's see if we have any questions. That's pretty much it for the fantasy genre part. Anything about that, or again about being an author, publishing, it's open day. My story, so those of you who read them, what's coming next?